screen sharing option for the presenters?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Good evening, good morning for everyone who are listening us. In the name of Facamp, I want to thank all of you that are joining us in this second international meeting on corporate integrity and global legal regulation, organized by our compliance research team. I would like to thank you, especially our professors Pontes, Karin Klemp and Fabio Curi, and also to thank Professor Fauzi Shokri, who is in charge of our master's program here at Facamp. I'm proud to give these introduction notes for this very important meeting because we are having here, okay, virtually, but please feel welcome as in person to our campus to join us in these very important topics to be discussed with our students, but also with our researchers and researchers all over the world. As I see, you have at least 11 countries joining us today and in the coming days. So that's very impressive, and I'm really proud to be part and to give this short introduction tonight and today for those who are in Asia especially. I also want to thank you, Professor Cooper from California Western School of Law, to help to organize this meeting, this first meeting, and also to thank our panelists today, Dr. Delton Chen, Professor San Borghese, Mr. Joe Pan, and Dr. Michael Song. I hope you're listening us from Hangzhou in China. I was there once, and I love the city, and I was very impressed with your university. So it's our pleasure to have you here in our campus, although virtually. So giving this very short and brief comments, I want to give the word back to Professor Pontes and Professor Cooper to begin this first panel on our meeting. And again, thank you for everyone, and congratulations for the organization of this meeting. Okay, good night and good day for everyone.
Thank you, Professor Sabatini. I would like to listen a brief words from our Master in Law Coordinator, Professor Fauzi Shokri, please.
Thank you, Professor Pontes. First of all, I would like to thank Professor James Cooper. In behalf, I say my good night for everybody here, all our foreign invitees. And I'd like to say hello to my director, academic director, Professor Sabatini. It's an honor your presence here. I'd like to thank once again Professor José Pontes, Fabio Curi, Karin Klemp for organizing again this meeting. We had another one last year and was successful. So I'd like to share all my greetings with all participants, and I'd like to say that I wish all a good job today and tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Professor Pontes for inviting me to help organize, to Professor Curi for being there with Professor Pontes, to Professor Sabatini, Professor Finn Shokri, all of you from Facamp. It's a joy to be here again. My name is James Cooper. I'm live and direct from San Diego, California. We've got a big panel. Very excited to welcome folks. They'll be staggering in at all, because it's all times of night and day where we're live and direct from. With us is Sam Borghesi's assistant AI assistant called Sam's Autopilot, which is going to be making notes. So welcome to the AI. That's the first time I've done this. When I was growing up, AI meant Amnesty International, just to be clear. And now it means something a whole lot different. Coming to us, although not literally from Australia, he's here in stateside, is Dr. Delton Chen, about whom I'll speak in a moment. Joe Pan is with us as well from Hong Kong and NFT Impact Alliance. And we've also got Professor Samuel Borghesi from UCLA, who's just finishing off a class in a couple of minutes and will joining us as well. Joe just put in the chat, good morning from Hong Kong, and he's going to be live and direct with us. Also, Dr. Michael Sung, who's a professor at ZIBS in China, in Shanghai, is also going to be with us. It's about 6 o'clock in the morning there. He's going to come by about 7 o'clock. And hello to everybody at the Facamp campus. And finally, to everybody who's watching us live streaming on YouTube. We've run out of time for the panel. It was so long to do all the thank yous. Thank you. Good night. All righty. We're going to start with Dr. Chen. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Super excited that he's with us. He founded the Global Carbon Reward Initiative. He's a qualified civil engineer and a geohydrologist. He holds a PhD in engineering from the University of Queensland in his native Australia, but also did his doctoral research on hydrology of the coral key in the Great Barrier Reef, and has 20 years of combined experience in groundwater management, environmental impact assessment, geothermal energy, and climate mitigation. He is a well-renowned thought leader in the development of public policies based on digital currencies, how they link blockchain to climate change, and he also developed the super innovative global carbon reward policy to help reduce and remove carbon at the speed and scale that are needed to stabilize the climate and to meet the 2015 Paris climate agreements. And you'll hear more from Dr. Chen in a moment, but truthfully, in essence, he believes that this global carbon reward, which he invented, can fill the funding gap for climate mitigation and help protect communities and ecosystems from the ravages of climate change and overconsumption, something that he's seen in his own research over the decades on Australia's coral reef, Great Barrier Reef, but also in all his work and now increasingly in the Middle East and worldwide here stateside in the US. Without further ado, I'll introduce each speaker as we go. So Dr. Chen, you have half an hour. We look forward. Do you prefer questions after your talk rather than during?
Perhaps it's best wait till after the talk, and I'll just confirm with you, do I have 20 to 25 minutes or?
Sure, and another 5 for question right after. That'd be terrific.
Terrific. Okay,
Thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen and hopefully this will work. So greetings, everybody. This presentation is making sense of carbon pricing in the monetary system. And just bear with me as I organize my screen. So I'm an interdisciplinary analyst. I'm not an economist by training. And what I've done is explored the possibilities of using a currency-like instrument to finance climate mitigation. And I'll explain some of the background to this in this presentation. Some of you may have heard of a novel called The Ministry for the Future, written by Kim Stanley Robinson. It's been discussed around the world because of its realistic storytelling of near future global warming. And it actually uses the policy that I developed as the plot or part of the plot. The novel refers to a carbon coin, and Stan Robinson, he often refers to carbon quantitative easing. So these are ideas that actually come from the policy, and I'll talk about those ideas. Before I begin about the policy itself, we might just review the climate problem, just to bring the context forward. So the climate problem has been carefully analysed by scientists, the IPCC, and so on. However, there's always new and somewhat alarming information coming to the fore over the rapidity of global warming and often about how it's occurring faster than expected. So, for example, this year, the summer was the hottest summer on record for our planet. And this is likely to due to both global warming, greenhouse gases, combined with an El Nino event in the Pacific. James Hansen, who's a famous climate scientist from the United States, he's written a paper which hasn't been accepted for publication yet, but in his paper, he makes the claim that the science community has underestimated the sensitivity of the climate to greenhouse gases because of masking from aerosol pollution. And since the shipping sector has reduced its sulfate pollution in the last decade, the effects of sulfate aerosols on cloud formation has changed. And the result appears to be that there are fewer clouds over the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, over the major oceans, which is leading to more rapid warming. Because of this, Hansen forecasts that we're going to see a sudden climate warming event over the next 10, 20 years. And indeed, the science community concur that we might pass 1.5 degrees in the next 5 years or so. Hansen actually thinks we could pass 2 degrees by mid-century. There are other issues with global warming that are emergent, complex, and not well understood, and these are the tipping elements in the climate system. Scientists are warning that some of these tipping elements could actually be approaching a tipping point, including the ones listed on the screen: the Greenland ice sheet, West Antarctic ice sheet, North Atlantic ocean circulation, coral reef die-off. Coral reef die-off is actually already happening. The Great Barrier Reef is an example. And coral reefs in the tropical warm waters are expected to be bleached, mostly bleached dead, when we pass 1.5 degrees. Thawing of permafrost, abrupt sea ice loss in the Barents Sea, all serious global level disruptions. Another feature of global warming and consumption globally is that it impacts on Earth systems other than the climate system. It also impacts on the biosphere. And some scientists have been looking at the Earth's what they call planetary boundaries, a concept that there are certain systems or processes that we depend on for our long-term survival, and they're concerned that these systems will be disrupted. They've identified 9 boundaries, they call them. And of these boundaries over the years, since 2009, those boundaries that have been passed, they argue are 6 now. So 6 of the 9 boundaries may have been breached. That came out recently. And also on the left side here, this Nature Communications article refers to the idea that the Earth could experience another mass extinction event if we passed about 5 degrees of global warming. So that gives you some idea of the level of risk that's associated with global warming. Recently in the United States and in New York, there was a UN General Assembly. At that assembly, there were declarations to accelerate work on the SDGs, and also a court ruling on climate change was proposed. However, in general, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, said that we're in deep trouble. The world's not really cooperating, coordinating efficiently or exponentially as we need. He says we're stuck in time with old systems and we need new modern multilateral institutions to tackle these global problems. This presentation, in the bit of time I have available, I only have 20, 25 minutes, I'm going to try and tackle one of the most complex problems that humanity faces. It is a very deep and complex problem. It involves money. Money is a deep, complex topic, just as climate change, just as carbon pricing. They're all complex problems. So let's have a look at money. Many economists say that there are 3 functions of money. Actually, I believe there are 4. This corresponds to a rhyme that was developed in the 1800s. Money has functions for a medium, a measure, a standard, a store, meaning that these are the 4 functions that define what money is. So it can act as a medium of exchange, it has a unit of account, there are social agreements, and it acts as a store of value. So these essential functions and these ideas need to be understood in order to be able to develop policies that deal with both money, central banking, commercial banking, and carbon pricing. However, with carbon pricing, I argue that a tool for carbon pricing would not or should not act as a medium of exchange. If it were, it would be money. But carbon pricing and tools for carbon pricing are not intended to be money. So we can just cross off the first function, medium of exchange, and then we still need those other three functions for carbon pricing, and I'll explain how this works. Before we delve into the details, I think it's worthwhile having a very high-level look at money. Money actually, the kinds of money that we've used as a civilization has changed over the centuries and over the millennia. Many people might not understand this, that in fact, before the Industrial Revolution, the world economy was not growing very much at all. And in that period, the most practical money was commodity money. Commodity money like gold and silver coins, it's very practical in a low technology civilization. The economy is not growing, so you don't need a growing money supply. When fossil fuels were discovered, notably coal, oil, natural gas, and the technologies to burn these sources of energy, the world economy grew very quickly. And so around the time of World War II, civilization transitioned out of representative money. Representative money is just representing other commodities, but we transitioned out of representative money into fiat money. And this was supported by Bretton Woods, and it was also supported by the end of the gold window in the early 1970s called the Nixon shock. So after the Nixon shock in the 1970s, the world was using a fully floating exchange rate system. And with fiat money, the key feature of it is that it's more or less in unlimited supply. Commercial banks can create as much as they need. Central banks can create it to meet the demand for money in the world economy. Notably, the point I would like to make is that this type of monetary system would not have been possible in the past because fiat money is most suitable for periods of rapid economic growth. Why? It's because it's debt-based, and you can't sustain debts in a non-growing economy. In antiquity and prior to the Industrial Revolution, that was understood. Debts had to be cancelled and debts simply couldn't accumulate exponentially. So that's important background information on money. Central banks. Well, central banks are incredibly important because they are in a sense, the backstop or the supervisors for our monetary system. And they play an important role for the financial system, managing banks and the supply of money. So, for example, they try to maintain low inflation and steady GDP growth. They influence interest rates, and they participate in open market operations, control the cost of borrowing and lending. And they often set the reserve ratios for commercial banks to control their lending and to stabilize the financial system. But they have shortcomings. So the shortcomings in the modern monetary system for central banks is that they generally do not view themselves as playing a major role in financing climate mitigation. This climate problem and the need to fund it is not part of their existing mandate structure, although there may be nuanced interpretations. And so this is a critical limitation, not only of central banks, but of the world economy today, that central banks are not supporting the funding and financing of climate mitigation at speed and scale. And the policy that I developed is designed to rectify this shortcoming by using central banks to support a new financial asset. This presentation also just touches very lightly on blockchains. I generally don't talk too much about blockchains because other people are better skilled and knowledgeable about blockchains than myself, but I did publish a paper in 2018 just summarizing the utility of blockchains And what I wrote is pretty much what the UN and other people had said about them in 2018, except for one thing. And I mentioned that the utility of blockchains is actually quite limited because blockchains themselves cannot solve the scalability problem for finance. They have a lot of uses in data management and data security and so on. But in order to solve the climate crisis, blockchain simply wouldn't be enough. I argue we need scalable finance through central banking and new macroprudential regulation. To understand money, even blockchains, central banks, commercial banks, and the policy I put forward, there is a lot of reading to be done and a lot of learning to be done because the monetary system is actually quite complex. This money flower diagram illustrates this complexity. It's actually a Venn diagram. And what it's telling us is that there are different types of money that can exist or does exist. So central banks in the blue circle or blue ellipse, they produce what's called central bank reserves. And that money stays within the central bank system for trading between financial institutions. The money that we use as citizens and businesses is not that money. We actually use mainly bank deposits, which are created by commercial banks. And the diagram shows where it exists in the money flower, and it constitutes about 97% of the money supply. Cash, on the other hand, is produced by central banks, and it's only about 3% of the money supply. The policy that I put forward would create a new financial asset, but it's not money, so it wouldn't appear in the money flower. However, it would require central banks to create more central bank reserves using a policy called CQE, or carbon quantitative easing. And so they would use that extra bank reserves to support the carbon currency. Climate policies and carbon markets. So in this presentation, I don't really have time. We don't have time to actually cover all these topics deeply, of course. We can only just go over the surface. And what I'm going to do is introduce climate policies in a high-level way, and I'll talk about carbon markets. So in the climate policy landscape, in my opinion, there are three general types of policies that can be used to mitigate climate change. On the left are the policies of state actors. These are policies of governments which are non-market. Then in the middle, we have market policies. And then on the right, we have policies of non-state actors. So the state actors, i.e. governments, they sign on to international agreements like the Paris Agreement. They might declare nationally determined contributions. They have fiscal spending, laws and standards and rules, and so on. On the right-hand side, we have the non-state actors that can develop their own policies like development banks, IMF, ESG reporting for corporates, impact investing, philanthropy, climate bonds, and so on and so forth. However, generally speaking, the economists using neoclassical economics, they mainly focus on carbon markets and carbon pricing to correct the market failure, because it has certain advantages in that by creating a price signal, we can utilize the creativity of markets to innovate and solve problems that government simply can't solve, because the problems we face are too complex for government, although government plays a role. With regards to carbon markets, you may have heard in the news that carbon offsetting and carbon credit markets have found to be often unreliable, perhaps downright corrupt in some cases, and causing considerable greenwashing, including companies. Some well-known companies have been called out for greenwashing, and certain registries and standards have been criticized by journalists and scientists for allowing suspect carbon credits to be traded. So this is a kind of an inherent problem of carbon markets for a variety of reasons. We don't have time to go into the details, but I just wanted to point that out. What you're looking at here is the carbon pricing classification table, which I developed, and this table identifies all the major pricing options that are possible that are fundamentally important. There are variants of these, but these are the main ones in my opinion. So there's quite a lot to deal with. And as you can see, it's inherently complex because we have voluntary markets, we have official compliance markets, we have subsidies, taxes, cap and trade, voluntary taxes, voluntary caps, and carbon credits for offsetting. So that's a lot of pricing options, and this is why the whole carbon market story is somewhat confusing to the uninitiated. However, in my analysis, what's unique about it, besides this table format, is the idea that there is another policy and way to price carbon that is not mentioned in economics textbooks. And this is called a carbon reward, and it's represented by the blue box in this classification table. The classification table is actually developed from a logical approach. It's based on a positive theory. We won't have time to go into it, but I just want to point that out. So what are the shortcomings of neoclassical theory on carbon pricing? Well, what I argue is that because we're limited to standard policies like carbon taxes, cap and trade, and so on, we are experiencing a slow boil problem. And what I mean by that is carbon pricing is insufficient in the world by about an order of magnitude or more. Public funding for the clean energy transition is insufficient by trillions of dollars per year. Commercial and development banks, which create the fiat supply, generally only lend to businesses that are profitable and have good credit ratings. For this reason, they continue to fund fossil fuel projects because fossil fuel projects are profitable, and they won't fund all renewable energy projects because they're not all profitable or they're too risky. Also, private investors have a fiduciary duty to focus on profitability, including they have to take into account the cost of capital, especially for energy projects that have large capex, large initial investments, and there's risks of political nature and of fiscal uncertainty, which affects subsidies and also sovereign risk. Developing countries experience high borrowing costs and high debt levels and climate costs. For this reason, developing countries are really struggling to develop their renewable energy sector. Also, many fossil fuel projects might be protected through trade treaties. So there are many reasons why the world currently is unable to transition quickly into clean energy. And that's why I call it a slow boil problem. So what's wrong with neoclassical economics? Well, the neoclassical theory on carbon pricing is mainly, well, it is framed on the work of Arthur Pigou. So Arthur Pigou, he identifies the negative externality, which is called the social cost of carbon, and it's a measure of the economic damages as a result of the choices of market actors. This is the standard theory. It does make good sense. The standard theory is complemented by the Coase theorem, which gives rise to the idea of cap and trade. So with cap and trade, a carbon-based unit for emissions is created and it's allowed to trade amongst polluters. And through that trading, a price is discovered that meets the needs of the polluters. And that's another way to manage or correct the market failure in terms of the negative externality identified by Arthur Pigou. So in my work, I challenged that theory by adding to it. And the reason we need more theory, I believe, is because humanity is currently suffering from this slow boil problem where we're like the proverbial frogs in the frying pan or the pot of hot water. We're trying to convince each other that we can solve the climate crisis using conventional carbon markets, carbon offsetting, and green growth. And what I argue is that this problem won't be solved in a conventional way, and we need what I call carbon rewards. So the theory I put forward, or the hypothesis is that we need the carbon reward to take care of the systemic risk that is posed by the world economy, including the banking system and the monetary system. So in doing so, I argue that there's another kind of externalized cost, which is not in textbooks, and I call it the risk cost of carbon. And I claim it's a systemic type of externality, which reflects the structural inadequacies of the monetary system and the profit-based system of money creation. It also invokes the Coase theorem because in this policy, there is a carbon asset which is tradable, called a carbon currency. We won't have time to go through these diagrams here and now, but I just wanted to point out that the theory for negative externalities on the left, the social cost of carbon, is expressed through these kinds of price quantity curves, typically looking at demand and supply curves and where they intersect. So by adding the tax, the ideal tax, to the cost of goods and services, there's a new optimum, and that's the theory of neoclassical economics for solving a market failure. But what I argue is that we also need to price the risk on the right-hand side, and so we need the reward equal to the risk cost of carbon to increase the rate of mitigation, including both carbon removal and carbon emissions reductions. So the carbon currency has a unit of account, which is 1 ton of CO2 strategically mitigated for 100 years. And this new currency will be traded in foreign exchange currency markets. It's not a medium of exchange, as I mentioned earlier. It's not a carbon credit. There is no carbon offsetting needed with this policy because it'd be underwritten with central bank policy, and it's not a cryptocurrency. The carbon reward, technically speaking, is the exchange rate of the carbon currency as it's valued in open markets. There's more technical detail behind the policy about how it's structured, how the financial mechanism works. But in this presentation, we don't have time to go into that. So I just thought I'd give you a brief intro to the carbon currency. Why is it useful? Well, we can use it to fund the climate finance gap, fill that gap. There is a need for about $3 to $6 trillion per year extra for conventional mitigation, clean energy, decarbonizing dirty sectors of the economy. And there's a need to fund about $1 trillion a year of carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere over the very long term. So that's what this policy is for, filling this finance gap. And the way it structures this problem is it has 3 rules. There are rules which we don't have time to go into detail, but rule 1 is for cleaner energy, rule 2 for cleaner business, and rule 3 for carbon removal. And the pricing for these 3 rules are different. But the outcome of the policy is to essentially fund energy asset exchanges so we can pay to keep fossil fuels in the ground, particularly in biodiverse areas that are impacted by extraction, such as the Amazon, the Congo Basin, and use the energy asset exchange mechanism to fund clean energy infrastructure, particularly in developing countries. Rule 2, we can use that to fund the decarbonisation of every sector, including buildings, for example. And Rule 3, we can use it to explicitly price and fund carbon dioxide removal because we're going to overshoot the carbon budget for 1.5 to 2 degrees. That's well understood according to scientific analysis of the world economy. So I'm now going to conclude. Maybe I've taken a bit longer than 25 minutes, but this is the last slide, I believe. Key points for carbon rewards. So the key points that I'd like to stress in concluding this short presentation is that I believe Pigu's negative externality is only partially corrected by carbon taxes, and it can't really be corrected properly at all because taxes are not popular enough. I argue that costs and risks should be managed with different policies because they're not the same. Costs and risks are different things. I argue that carbon rewards can be used to price carbon mitigation and that carbon rewards can be used to avoid offsetting and associated greenwashing. And at a fundamental level, I argue that central banks are needed to underwrite the carbon reward for managing systemic risk. whereas currently central banks are limited by the notion of neutrality in markets, but this is undermining the clean energy transition. So thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation, and hopefully we have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. Delton Chen, wow, that's a lot of stuff in a very short period of time, but just super informative and inventive, and thank you for the work that you're doing. A lot of this is thankless, but on behalf of future generations, we're most grateful. Any questions? Anybody want to ask a question to Dr. Chen while we have him here? We have one. Please go ahead. Let me pass you the microphone. Can you state where your name and where you're from, please? What institution?
Hi, Professor. How are you? My name is Pedro. I am class from Facamp and a teacher in other School of Law here. I would like to ask you for Mr. Chen, how do you see the development in Brazil about this? Because I read your paper and you propose a model, a mathematical model about the SCC and RCC. And how do you see this in our Latin America, specifically in Brazil right now? I don't know if I was clear in my English.
Thanks for the question, Pedro. Well, just a side point, there was a journalist in Brazil with the name Circus who died, I think, a year ago. He actually also published some articles on a central bank style policy. But the approach I've adopted or developed is different to any other. You mentioned the risk cost of carbon, social cost of carbon, which I presented. So for Latin America, if the policy were actually implemented at scale, it would potentially have huge benefits for the Amazonia in protecting it from deforestation and grazing pressure and agriculture that's monocropping, like palm oil and so on. The reason is that we could fund the protection of forests for a problem called avoided deforestation. So avoided deforestation is tricky. It would require a statistical method that links to satellite images of road construction. People are already proposing that style of carbon pricing. However, we could couple that to other incentives for communities to fulfill their needs in their local economy. So one of the problems of the Amazonia and to the north in Suriname, the Suriname Basin as well, is that the local communities, indigenous and rural people, they do need an income. And if there is not a sustainable market for them, they generally will do extraction, like cut down trees, maybe collect animals that are rare and so on. There's illegal mining, gold mining operations and things like that. So the idea is we try to use the carbon currency, not just to protect the forest, but also provide secondary incentives for sustainable markets. This approach has not been tested. It's just a theory. The Brazilian country and the Latin American countries, they could play a vital role in helping demonstrate the policy. Okay, so at demonstration and piloting, we would love to have 1 or 2 countries in Latin America involved in that. So that's 2 major points that Brazil and other countries might find interesting.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. That's fabulous. I put in the a name of someone who's part of Joe Pan's NFT Impact Alliance out of Hong Kong. He's in Suriname. I put his information into the chat below in a direct message. So I hope you got it. I'll put one more from Suriname, who's a wonderful philanthropist and blockchain enthusiast. I'll do the same. Those are two people in the Surinamese community, although one of them lives in Paris, who could be very helpful in the research that you're doing. And no doubt our friends at Facamp will have some ideas of whom in Brazil are the right people to talk to as well. Which is one of the points of this whole meeting, is not just to talk about stuff, but actually, as you're doing, do stuff. Any other questions, please, for Dr. Chen while we still have him here? Sorry, Zed, we can't hear you yet.
Hello?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Delton Chen, Dr. Delton Chen, for your brilliant lecture here. Very stimulating and makes us think about our future in a way that we were not exactly prepared to. But lots of hints and interesting thinking. I'd like to ask you, we have a kind of conflict in our main issues of these panels that are going to develop these days here. You are stressing the point of money regulation based on central banks' stimuli for carbon reward and other interesting ideas. On the other hand, we have here lots of scholars and experts in decentralized money and other crypto and other issues that are exactly on topic here. Do you see that, is there a way of harmonizing these fronts to conquest the points that you are, that interest to all of us, of course? They're decentralized money and also central banks, because at the end of the day, we are talking about business regulations, banks regulation, money regulations, and other fronts to get the point to the environmental matters. Please, if you could give a light to us, I would like to listen. Thank you very much.
Sure, Jose. I think the question, correct me if I'm wrong, are you asking how to harmonize crypto and blockchains with this policy or central banking? Is that the question, or was it something a bit different? Yeah, it is. So, well, blockchains actually are already mainstream, and surprisingly, central banks were one of the earliest movers on using blockchains or similar technologies. They've been interested for a long time in the topic of real-time settlement of assets. So there are numerous projects around the world involving various central banks on blockchain-style settlement systems. So also corporates are using blockchains. Lots of them are using it for ledgers. So it's already harmonized. With crypto, however, that's a bit different, because crypto is typically a fully private system without regulation, and that is not harmonized with central banking by definition. For this policy, we would love some support, from any community. However, the crypto community tends to have a culture and attitude of extreme decentralization and anti-authoritarianism, anti-government, anti-central bank. So generally speaking, the crypto community has not been interested at all in the global carbon reward. The people who are more interested in it are coming from the carbon market space. Yeah, so that's all I can say. I don't really have too much more to add to that.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Chen. In the interest, and thank you for the question, Professor Pontes. In the interest of time, because we've got folks in Asia, we've got folks here in the States as well, and in Latin America, and a special welcome to Professor Clem Franco, who is here with us as well from Facamp online. I was going to invite Professor Sam Borghese, who is at UCLA and just a dynamo. He's designed and taught 8 unique courses inside the Master of Quantitative Economics program at UCLA. He's founded his first crypto hedge fund in 2022, 13 years ago, when he was all of 4 years old, because look how young he looks now. In the first 6 months of that, he yielded a 40% net of fees for his investors. He specializes in creating and leading teams of data scientists and data engineers to build business questions, to answer business questions, but he's also managed teams through contract work for several multi-billion-dollar organizations like Ingram Micro, Interscope Records, CP Group, Louis Dreyfus Company, and a number of others. He teaches applied machine learning, blockchain applications, the first ever at the economics department at UCLA, cloud computing, SQL, and data management. He's also a member of the formerly Digital Davos, now called Davos Worldwide, a group of which I'm a member, and this is how I know him, and just a wonderful speaker, sought after at NFT conferences around the world. He's going to talk to us a little bit about his work, some of the NFT issues and the environmental impacts, and I'll leave it for Sam to explain the rest. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Professor Cooper. And thank you too, Professor Pontes, for asking me to do this. I greatly appreciate it. As James was saying, I'm here at UCLA and actually just walked down from teaching right now. So thank you, Dr. Chen, for your flexibility going first. And that was a fantastic presentation. I greatly appreciate it. Let me share this over. So yeah, to step back a bit, or step over into the cryptocurrency arena, as Dr. Chen was mentioning, there is large concerns around the environmental impact of mining crypto specifically. So I wanted to give a high-level overview of what is blockchain, what are the benefits of it, and of course, what is the detriment, what is the environmental impact essentially coming from to mine cryptocurrencies. Is it worth it? And then go from there. So I'll go through what is blockchain. We have blockchain business use cases, which I will likely skip over. And if anybody is largely interested in them in the question section, I will go back. And then, of course, talk about proof of work, which people are worried about for the environmental impact. So if we start with the data we are streaming to our computers from the internet and so forth all the time, this is a centralized storage of data, a typical database. You or me or whoever, when we go to a domain, we put in the URL, we request some data, and some of that is returned. It might be HTML that creates a web page, or it may be some other data that is pulled in, such as our ordering food or tax information and so forth. So there's some issues with centralized storage of data. One is, of course, security, right? Bad actors can get leaks in a scenario or in a case study such as 2017, Equifax lost hundreds of millions of social security numbers because when there was a breach in one unique or one sector of this database, all of the data was contained, and so it lost everything, right? So the decentralized solution, instead of data being stored with one party that has control, individuals can take ownership over their own data and so forth. The case everyone cares about, because it was the initial vision of use case of cryptocurrencies and blockchain, is in money. And money already is largely digitized, right? This quote here showed that physical currency, at least in the US, only makes up about 11% of the total amount of money circulating around. So that means 89% of US currency is already digital. It's already digitized, and there is only a small fraction that is still physical. So if we think about currency as some store of data, what is an interaction with a bank when we're sending, wiring, transferring money? It really is a user requesting some data and some data being returned or sent elsewhere. So banks having failures, you're trying to get access to some digital asset or some digital ownership you have. But when it is centralized, when your money, your currency is centralized inside of a bank, they can be corrupt, can be lost, there can be hacks and so forth. That causes a lot of the banking failures we've seen in 2008 and so forth. Why does this happen? It's because our data is contained in a centralized location. It is non-custodied by users. And so it leads to the centralized store, the ability for them to take actions that are not in the best interest. And of course, cause horrible things to happen, such as bankruptcies. So the vision of cryptocurrencies and blockchain and so forth is everybody has ownership of their own money. Instead of needing to go through a bank to lend out currencies to lenders or purchase bonds and elsewhere, the decentralized solution is everybody has possession of their own currency. And the security allows for people to lend out, do micro lending and so forth from themselves without an intermediary, without a third party. So what I always say when I open something and open a conference and somebody asks, what is blockchain? Blockchain removes the middleman, right? What is a bank in this situation with money? They are a middleman in between you and lenders, in between you and lendees, and so forth. So blockchain, all of the use cases, is removing the middleman through essentially a trustless automation. And all those courses all those graduate courses that I teach that Jamie mentioned, well, they span a lot of things, everything from quant finance to machine learning to cloud computing and so forth, and blockchain. They all fit under the umbrella that I see as automation. It's removing places there could be mistakes, removing places there could be issues, fat finger mistakes, and elsewhere. Okay, so decentralized storage of data. How do we go about this, right? Decentralized storage of data would look like copies of data all throughout the world and scattered all throughout the world. And anybody, depending where you are, can interact with that data and those databases. And they will get the same information, whether they are nearby each other or very far away. Okay. So we already have this, and we've had this for a long time. This is the cloud, right? Data can be stored across many different servers in many different places. The big issue with decentralized storage of data in this way, such as using Google Cloud, AWS, Oracle, or other cloud providers, is it's decentralized physically, but the data is still all owned and controlled by one group or one person. So what happens if Google decides they don't want information, they don't want Dr. Chen's information to get out there about a carbon currency and so forth? They can say, we're not housing any of this information, and essentially shut down the decentralization and shut down the storage of data. So that is the big risk of having centralized storage of data and what decentralized storage is looking for. So truly decentralized storage of data, you would have individuals, individual companies, individual entities actually holding. So if maybe this one group or this one person doesn't agree with what is being stored in Australia, that node or that database turns off, but there's still a vast number of people containing this information and so forth. So just because somebody disagrees with what is being, the data that is being stored, it doesn't mean it will go away. So in the case of cryptocurrency, right? China banned ownership of cryptocurrency and mining and so forth. Bitcoin and these other currencies did not go away just because one of the parties disagreed with the data being stored, right? We see money is data, cryptocurrency is data, US dollars are even data, okay? So what this isn't necessarily blockchain. What this is distributed ledger technology, allowing for data, in this case, a ledger, to be housed with multiple people distributed across the world or distributed across multiple people. Blockchain is a subset of distributed ledger technology, right? DLT, blockchain is a subset of that. It is a type of distributed ledger technology. And some history of the blockchain. These ideas were around actually back in the 90s, just like neural networks were around back in the 50s, the math and the ideas behind it, behind distributed ledger technology and so forth. Nick Szabo was the first to say that blockchain could be used for a currency that can be transacted without a middleman. It would be strictly peer-to-peer. And of course, Bitcoin was the first use case of blockchain in digital financial transactions. This white paper. So what benefit does this have other than the ones we've talked about? Is crypto beats out gold and fiat in almost every category for a trade of money, right? And more. Right? It is more durable than fiat. It is highly divisible. It's secure. It's easily transactable and scarce. Right? And it is also decentralized and programmable. I won't talk about smart contracts in this, but the smart programmable allows nearly every industry to be revolutionized in some way by using a blockchain-based currency instead of a fiat one, because it is a form of automation. So what I will say is the first case of the internet was actually used in between UCLA, right? Got a shout out, and Stanford to send a message. And they were trying to send the message login, right? And it crashed. And then the first real use case of the internet was by military, for military communications. You ask anybody on the street, majority of them won't be able to tell you those first use cases of the internet, because it has expanded into every bit of our lives. We are at this conference right now because of the internet. Many people likely got their food, their housing, and so forth because of the internet. So the first use case of blockchain being financial decentralization will be a moot point one day. And I do believe that blockchain will find itself, as Dr. Chen has already said, it's been leaching into industries and governments. We will see blockchain and distributed ledger technologies enveloping every aspect of our lives as the internet did. So where can it make business more efficient? You have automation, you have immutable, it cannot be changed, and it's trustless. There's no trusted third party here. So I'm going to skip this business use case section I threw in here. But there's lots of business use cases from remittances, and I'm happy to go back to any of these if anybody has a large question on this. But remittances, shipping logistics, health records, education records, clearing houses for equities, making things more efficient, and voting, and so forth, right? Those are all industries being revolutionized right now because of automation, the immutable, and the trustless nature of blockchains. Okay. However, this is a talk about sort of the environmental issues surrounding cryptocurrencies and understanding where those environmental issues come from. Now, we've talked a lot about the benefits of cryptocurrencies and said that there are some business use cases surrounding this. That's the benefit, but is it worth the negative externality of the environmental impact? I'll talk a little bit about the flow and how the mining of Bitcoin in different currencies work through proof of work. So we know distributed ledger technology. It's what we define to be Bitcoin or some of these currencies. And what we have is somebody sending money, right? This is the data being transferred. In this case, Alice sends Bob $7 or something. And we have somebody transferring money for some good or service, and so forth. So how the blockchain works is individuals have a wallet, and this is like a unique ID. Think of a bank account number associated with individual user. And so when somebody sends some cryptocurrency, the data that is posted to the blockchain is this account number or this wallet is sending some information to another person. Now, we won't go into the proofs behind it, but there is a public key, which is an account number, and a private key, which is like an associated password. All that needs to be known is nobody can send transactions from a wallet unless they have the private key. That's all I'll say on that. And how something gets posted to the blockchain is this information and more of account sends to another account a certain amount of money is put into an encryption algorithm, say SHA-256, and in this case. And what happens is this encryption algorithm outputs some binary digits where there is no way to go from the binary set of numbers back to the information. Okay. Bitcoin uses SHA-256 and elliptic curve cryptography. But the important thing to know about the cryptographic nature is the information that goes in here cannot be figured out in reverse. Okay. So how does it get posted to the blockchain? Is you have the information, which is all the prior transactions or data regarding all the prior transactions, the new transactions, and then a number guessed by a validator. And because we don't know what will output for what we input, the only way to find out is to run through this cryptographic function and get the output here. So what happens is a set of validators start guessing numbers, right? They start guessing numbers. And what the blockchain is looking for is a series to begin for this scrambled output of this cryptographic function. So if all of us on this call started guessing numbers to try to validate some upcoming transactions, the only way to get 5 zeros is to guess enough times and essentially get lucky. One of us get lucky. Okay. How the blockchain works is it rewards whatever validator guesses this number with a reward, with a Bitcoin reward. The current reward, if you guess a number that posts transactions to the blockchain, is 6.25 Bitcoin. This is rewarded every 30 minutes, okay, to some validator. These validators, if I just jump back to the slides, are the ones holding and distributing the data of the blockchain. The data is what transactions have gone where and so forth. Okay. So what happens is if the blockchain requires 5 zeros to be in front of this randomly generated sequence, right, based on your input, it will take on average about 32 guesses to guess a number where the output of this randomly generated function gives you 5 zeros up front. Because 2 raised to the 5, 32 possibilities, only one of them validates the transaction. Who's it? Right, so if we have 4 miners and they're guessing 32 times for every 30 minutes, the block difficulty is set to 5. And then these new transactions are posted every 30 minutes. However, if more validators come online, let's say double the validator, now all of a sudden they're guessing 64 guesses every 30 minutes. The block difficulty will increase, and it will actually require a higher number of zeros, a more specific output for the transaction to be validated. Okay. This is done automatically inside of the blockchain. It is recording the amount of people on the network and changing how difficult it is to validate a block of transactions. Okay. So we only got a bit more time. I'll go into some more details, but hopefully this takes away some of the mystery behind what validating is, or what mining is. People talk about mining. Mining is just calculating or guessing random numbers using computing power to the blockchain. Okay. So this block difficulty, right? This number of zeros in front of the output that is requested changes with the amount of validators, what happens is it was profitable to mine on a personal computer with very little electrical input back in 2014, 2015. Okay, because there's so few people guessing, your computational power or your amount of guesses you can throughput made it profitable to do on a personal computer. However, now with the block difficulty increasing, right, the number of zeros required, it is only profitable to use custom-built machines, right? These are from some companies like Bitmain and so forth, and supercomputer warehouses. And sometimes this still isn't even profitable to mine in this way. So the environmental issue with mining proof of work cryptocurrencies comes from this intrinsic, right, built into the code, the blockchain, this intrinsic need to hold the block time to 30 minutes, okay, and to make it more and more difficult. So why do people keep getting online? Why do people keep mining more? Why does the block difficulty keep becoming more and more difficult? Well, that 6.25 Bitcoin we saw back here, rewarded every 30 minutes, that 6.25 Bitcoin, that is cut in half every 4 years. So what happens is the reward, the supply that is paid out every 4 years gets cut in half. And all of a sudden, the profitability or the revenue of these super computers is cut in half. So what is required to keep those online? They either have to turn off or the price of Bitcoin has to increase. So these events where the reward is cut in half is called a halving. And this is a supply shock. Right? It has a controlled supply and it is shocked, it is cut in half. What occurs after each halving? Here's an old graph back when I taught this. We saw an 8,000% increase in price in the year following, a 300% increase in price, and a 600% increase in price. And I think the one not on this graph, oh no, this is continuing. So it's fixed in there where the price needs to increase for these miners to remain profitable. Okay, so the income of Bitcoin mining is based on three things. It's based on the Bitcoin price. Okay, because if the price of Bitcoin goes down, that 6.25 is worth less in whatever currencies, dollars. It is based on the block reward, that's 6.25. And then also a factor of the inverse of the mining difficulty. Because as we saw, if the mining difficulty is higher, all of a sudden your guesses aren't worth as much. And you have to emit a certain amount of energy per guess. The cost is, of course, some CapEx, some equipment, some space, some wiring. But the input cost to mine 1 Bitcoin is energy. And of course, there's rents and things like this. But let's just focus on energy. So what happens if there's a positive shock to energy cost? What's really interesting is mining becomes not profitable for some. And people will turn off their mining rigs. What this creates is it makes miners shut down, making the mining difficulty less difficult. So it's really beautiful. There's sort of a built-in supply and demand curve for miners based on the energy cost. Energy goes up, all of a sudden mining becomes easier because people are turning off, income goes up, and we reach an equilibrium where the profitable miners. So what happens? Bitcoin price goes down, people turn off their miners, the mining difficulty goes down, it increases the inverse, and so. Okay. So mining is very decentralized, individual base, but it is largely held inside the United States, and so forth. Something I knew I wasn't going to be able to cover is not all cryptocurrencies run on this proof of work dynamics. Okay. And if Bitcoin also solved the energy crisis at the same time, that would be astounding. But I think it is astounding that the creation of this, right, back in 2009, has not been needed to be changed at all. The code is not changed whatsoever. And it is still operating to decentralized currencies as a decentralized currency. Right? If you had any corporation, I doubt they could come up with some code that did not need to be modified for the last 14 years and still did exactly as it was planned to. So Bitcoin's mission is not to solve the energy crisis at all. But it is doing what it sought after. And there are many other currencies that are going after reducing emissions, even reducing emissions for Bitcoin and reducing emissions for industries. It's not Bitcoin, but there are many other currencies doing that. I hope this took away some of the mystery around what is mining and why someone would go about doing it, even with the environmental impacts. That reward is quite large. I will open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Borghese. That was excellent, and I learned a ton. And it's obviously demystifying this is important as we move forward. And it's a world filled with acronyms, whether it's, you know, POW, PO, proof of stake, POS, or I was trying to think of, oh my God, what have I gotten into, what the acronym for that is, but I'll save that for another time. Any questions for Sam Borghese, please? Please go ahead, Professor Franco.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Professor James Cooper, for being with us. I'd like to say hello to everybody and thank everybody that has presented before. Excellent topics. Sam, I was wondering about the mining issue and why this would make sense in an environment of digital banks or digital currencies of central banks. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? What's the difference between a Bitcoin and a DCBC? Maybe you can explain to us a little bit. Thank you.
Sure. So as Dr. Chen was talking about before, a central bank digital currency is not a cryptocurrency because it is centralized. So all of the issues regarding current fiat money, central banks can overprint, right? They can do things monetarily that people don't agree with or are not expecting, right? They can do things of this nature. It's one party having total control over a currency is really the main issue that cryptocurrencies sought out to undo. Now, central bank digital currencies are, such as the FedNow system and things like this, they are trying to take a lesson from cryptocurrencies or blockchain-based cryptocurrencies, and utilize the 24/7 settlement, the cheap nature of these transactions, right? If I were to send $20 of Bitcoin or $200 million of Bitcoin, it would be a near identical fee, $20, something like that. You could also send $20 million on Easter, Sunday night, right? Holidays, anytime, and so forth. And it will be validated in about 30 minutes onto the blockchain. So they're trying to take these positives from digital currencies, from cryptocurrencies, but the negatives are still there. So I share an unpopular opinion that I do think central bank digital currencies will win out over cryptocurrencies. It's a very unpopular opinion, I said on a panel, because a lot of people say, what's the value of a dollar, of a US dollar? There's no value. But the truth is, the value is they have the ability to tax one of the richest countries in the world, right? And there's value in the relationships and things along that. So I do think fiat money has some value, and I do think the people in power do not like to give that up so easily. So it will remain a new asset class. Do I think it will? Cryptocurrencies will overthrow central bank digital currencies? In my personal opinion, I think it's a long shot.
Thank you for that. Any other questions for Professor Borghese, please? Well, hearing none, oh, you've got one, Jose? Oh, we'll keep going? Okay, we'll keep moving because of the time. Thank you so much, Sam, for being part of this today. And thank you to all of you, again, for staying with us. We now bring our Asian colleagues live and direct from China and Hong Kong into the house with us. Dr. Michael Sung is here from ZIBS, and Mr. Joe Pan is here. Joe's the editor of Blockchain Asset Review, and he writes for NFT Meta News, and he's got broadcasting experience both in Cantonese and Mandarin, and his journalist and publishing career has covered both Chinese and English media from print to radio, and he's been a leading voice and advocate for ESG metrics and impact creation for digital assets. He's executive director of Impact NFT Alliance and co-founded the Carbon Neutral Club Hong Kong with the mission to educate and motivate individuals and organizations to start the journey of carbon neutrality voluntarily against the fast-changing financing and regulatory regime. He's been a leading voice and advocate for linking all of these things together, and really either through the Foreign Correspondence Club, he's on the board of governors there, or through his various work advancing the UN's SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Joe is very much a leader. I now present you Joe Pan. Welcome and good morning.
Good morning from Hong Kong, and for those who are in different time zones, good evening or good afternoon. So thank you, Professor or Mr. James and Professor Pontes, and for the invitations. And I'm really intrigued by all the talks. And instead of talking about the same lines about environments and carbons, I thought I would go ahead and do something quite different and present something that is on the top of the news, at least for those who are still watching TVs in the North America. You probably noticed a lot of reruns has happened in the past couple months. About 5 months ago, Hollywood went on a strike that's actually kind of stalled the entire production and creative cycle. And the Hollywood strike, while it's not anything new to most of us and most of the people, but sitting in Hong Kong, this is where the world intersects in technology, especially in blockchain, and also there's laws and regulations. And I think it will be most appropriate to share the latest project I'm working on is called PROM, which is stand for People's Republic of Movies. So what you're looking on the screen is probably some of the most visible and memorable movies. And I will get to why we have those movies, a collection of those movies. And it spans from, probably most of us in the age group that have seen one or two of those movies at some point. And I see some smiles on the faces, and Dr. Delton Chen is looking and smiling, and probably Sam is looking at the same thing. But what we're getting to is a pretext on what I will be explaining, that potentially a solution using blockchain to solve the Hollywood problem. And there's such thing as Hollywood problem is really caused by Hollywood accounting. And if you look at Hollywood accounting, the word Hollywood accounting, there is actually a Wikipedia page dedicated to the term Hollywood accounting. Hollywood accounting is as synonymous, and it's also an open secret where they use different types of companies and vehicles and distributors around the world, international distribution, to cover and kind of, to lack of a better word, to cook the book. And a lot of people who were investing into movies learn it the hard way, that where they find out doesn't matter how much the box office actually grows and headlining around the world, how successful it is, at the end, they may still lose money. And so this is called Hollywood accounting. And going forward, so the problem, why there is a Hollywood strike going on, and I will get to also why I'm involved, because this I kind of talk about the technology, but the pretext to the Hollywood strike is actually goes way back in the past 10 years, where the Silicon Valley folks and the technology company have been moving or eating the Hollywood studios cheese, and they are losing billions of dollars from the normal ways of movie loyalty and distributions revenue, because the technology companies such as Netflix of the world in the streaming industry have been reluctant and outright refuse to share the exact data behind it. So you have a lot of companies or a lot of studios have no visibility to how many downloads has been made or from each of the platform after they sign off on a rev share contract. They have no way to find out how they can actually build them. And so this is the pretext to it. Of course, fast forward to 5 months ago, or about a year ago, when with the advent of AI, there's a huge threat and actually become more real when the studio are actually changing the contract and saying, look, potentially AI is going to replacing some of the jobs. And that's the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's went on the strike. So this is the context. And of course, we added the latest about less than a week ago, there's a settlement starting to happen with the first of the Writers Guild. But bear in mind, there are a total of 3 or more guilds, major guilds actually go on strike in Hollywood. And this is unprecedented because all of them have strike in a rolling kind of sequence in the past. And this is the second longest strike over 5 months, and also the first time all of them overlap, including their sister and brother unions across the Atlantic, where in UK and some other jurisdictions are actually go on strike. So it not only brought the entire creative industry and people watching TVs like yourself, been watching the rerun, and very high profile statements and headline news where the unions and duking it out with the establishments of the studios. So the next one, this is where the projects that I'm involved in right now that potentially can solve that problem, democratizing the film ecosystem. And the key to that is the mission is everyone know about the open secret about Hollywood accounting, but it's really a stiff uphill battle to fight against the studios or the establishments where they want to keep everything in a secrets and cooking the book through the Hollywood accounting. And this is also, there are no technologies or ways to go about doing this other than bringing lawsuits. And so that's where the lawsuits where you have Scarlett Johansson still suing a major studio after she was featured and participated in one of the most successful movies, Black Widows and others. But close to 10 years later, she still have not been able to get her share of money. So the mission of this prompt People's Republic of Movie is to create a new film ecosystem that unites the global creators, give them access to more equitable and transparent financials and new funding to be able to create a truly creators economy. So now for those who are crypto or Web3 native, you often hear the term creators economy. And just about everyone tell you, say, hey, creators economy, we have this, we have the NFT, we have other things. But most of the projects that we have seen, and you have seen as well, have been follow the following cadence, where some great guys and creative mind come up with a Web3 concept and say, let's do a creative economy. Let's raise some fund and then go build the community. So I'm sure you often say, hey, give me some money, we'll go build the community. But here you have a very much a approach that is different. Here you have very much an identifiable community versus normally in the Web3 project, you have people in the distributed way. You don't really know other than their a Discord, a name, and you don't know who they are. But here you have in Hollywood, it's one of the most identifiable community in the world. Matter of fact, members of the community fight over to identify and flex and show themselves who they are because they want to be, they are proud and they want to be known as a member of a community. So here you have a community already identified and well united, and they actually are coming to the technology and the Web3 and blockchain community say, hey, we need a solution. And so this is where I was able to participate in this very exciting and very much interesting projects. We have two co-founders actually coming from the community and coming from the industry. And instead of saying we have this great idea, give us some money, we go raise the fund, they say we have a community already, we just need the technology and solution. And this is where after some strategizing sessions, we talked about it. Look, people often hear and often compare a new unicorn, say, hey, we are the next Uber, we're the next Airbnb. And if you look at all these unicorns, most of them are not based on they are not creating a new technology. They are all use the existing technology to find ways to bring efficiency to the current markets, whether it's the buy side or sell side. So if you look at Uber, the consumer behavior has not changed. People still need to make a call for the taxi. They still need to pay, but it's a new platform based on existing technology in some Web2 technology of an app that bring efficiency onto the supply and demand side, and therefore giving them not only the convenience on the efficiency, but also the transparency on pricing and based on supply and demand. Same thing with Airbnb. So what are we looking at prompt right now? On prompt, we're looking at the same behavior. The actor and the creator and the talent still need to find a way to sign a contract. Whether it's a smart contract or a paper contract, they still go through this existing behavior of looking at a contract where they can secure not only the payment for the immediate service, but use of their likeness and image and the IP in the future. They want to get reoccurring loyalty. And of course, nothing has changed. If you're looking at where can we find a new platform based on existing technology to bring efficiency. And as the previous speakers and presenter have explained it well, blockchain. A blockchain brings technology that brings transparency. But also there are smart contracts that build on top of blockchain. Now you can have a legal side and regulation side of it that can actually bring equality and transparency and enforceable into the picture. And so this is where it gets super interesting. And here you have one of the most successful Hollywood producer, Lucas Foster, who has brought in $6 billion box office in the career of his production career and work with the biggest names. So earlier, now you understand why I share the movie poster. So one of his most successful, or two of his most successful films he produced include Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that grows somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 millions across the world. And this is also the movie that brought those two. We all know what happened. They marry and together, and this is what brought them together. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. And on the right top, jumps 21 Jump Street. For those who are old enough who have watched the TV, long-running TV, plus 30 seasons of 21 Jump Street. This is the TV series and the movie franchise that actually launched Johnny Depp. Look at how young he was. And guess what? Eric was the one who wrote the entire script and worked with him, in some ways launched this superstar's career. And look at Mad Max, even though Lucas Foster did not produce Mad Max, but Eric wrote a lot of the script in the Mad Max. And then, of course, the latest and the most recent box office hit is Ford versus Ferrari. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. This is much better than Fast and Furious. This is based on true story. Ford put together a car at Le Mans and beat Ferrari. So this is also another recent hit that produced by Lucas Foster. So all these things that not only brings nostalgia to us is also the fact that these people are coming from the industry, and they themselves recognize the flaw and inefficiency within the industry. And they're trying to say, let's solve this with technology. So what is the strategy? Well, harness the proven user behavior that I already talked about, and the decentralization that Sam, Professor Burgess, and also Delton Chan have mentioned about the collaboration of technology and using blockchain to bring transparency to this and find a way to equalize this. This is part of a pitch deck. We are going through a fundraising right now. So I'm literally sharing something practical for the students and for the conference. People, VC always often look at, well, what is the addressable market? Well, the addressable market is not just Hollywood. You have 93+ billion related to filming in the United States, but it could be a market that is already expanding annually at a CAGR of 8.9 through 2030 by industry study and reports. and the market is growing 7% annually, and it's also recession proof. Look at how well people, how many downloads, and how much people are consuming right now, and probably among the audience right here, during the not only the COVID years, but right now you continue to transition your consumer behavior and watching films on your TV, on your big screen. So this is the addressable market. And globally, you look at all the dots. You have not just Hollywood, but across the world, you have UK, some of the major production center, and Nairobi is becoming another major African production, film, entertainment production center. Of course, not to mention Hong Kong and Korea and Japan. So the addressable market is huge. Well, what's the business model? The business model is based on the community, adding the technology, and find a way to put also distribution on blockchain, and you will create a true creators economy, not just some NFT projects, not just some much talk about hype Web3 projects say, hey, we use the money to create a community. Here you have existing community actually doing some of those. So I won't go into the detail, but there is also the platform that look at, there's a big education component of it. What is the education? You look at the Hollywood or the acting economy in education. You look at the USC, School of Edinburgh, the film school, the communication school, and the multimedia school. How much does a student who's interested in getting to film production, learning about everything they spend? This is another $1 billion industry. And so part of the Prompt platform is to build a community of creators that are willing to share and actually help, actually participate in the practical training. And so when we issue the Prompt token, they can either earn, and they can also earn by sharing, by participating in real projects, being a script reader, being a promoter online. They earn the token. They can also use the token toward their education and learning and development, and therefore creating the liquidity for a tokens that is just not for speculation, but there is a fair amount of utility. So there's the token can be for the existing members to pay for their membership. It can be the current members or members outside of the United States where they want to find a way to learn and participate, to pay for events, to pay for the online premiere. And so I'm going to go through the technology real quick, and then I probably would pause and take questions, and we will end this and probably can point to you another follow-up if we have other presentation. So everything's about technology. So first, often people ask, where is your token? Where is this technology going to be built on? What layer? What chain? So we are looking, and we in talk and already partnering with Hedera. Hedera is one of the most visible and validated chain in the world, with a governing council that composed of all the blue chip names you probably recognize. And Mr. Cooper, you probably recognize DLA Piper. So when you have a global law firm as a technology governing council, that's going to IBM, all the other one, LSE in education, Google, there's no other bigger name than that, and LG when you have all that. So this is where you want to bring legitimacy, and you want to have your project to sit on a chain that's governed by legit nodes around the world, and super blue chip and $1 billion blockchain company. The other missing piece is distribution. Whoever controlled distribution controlled the revenue, and they are the one, when colluding with the studios, they are the one cooking the book. And the only way to bring the transparency into this way is actually putting the film in blockchain. In the past, there's no such things where you can stream on the blockchain until recently. There is a listing of another company called PKT, and we have been talking and been able to partner with them. They are the BT BitTorrent, as some of us old enough to remember, the BitTorrent on blockchain. That's the best analogies for them. In short, they are the BitTorrent on blockchain. Once the movie can be streamlined or download or stream through a blockchain network, everything is transparent because every download will be recorded and revenue will be going through the end of the value chain, and will be able to record it and therefore enable the entire smart contracts, a group of them, to creators, to the provider, from the grip to the lighting guilds, union worker to the talent. Everything is transparent and therefore equalized, and be able to equalize the playing field instead of people who control the distribution, control the money, and colluding with the studio. Now, some of the roadmaps I won't go into detail. We have done the comparable study and look at the competitor out there, and you look at the prompt is clearly the one that answers all the things, including the crowdfunding, the distribution on blockchain, and also the NFT collectibles, where we all know the creators economy. For those who are not familiar with that, that deserve another session. But this is not just a typical and easy, the ones that you see out there. This is a true creators economy, enable them to get the payment and the loyalty at the end. So I'll go back to address a little bit more about the community. So the community, in addition to the guild, there are about close to 8 million members that already clearly identify, 4 million that already sign and have some sort of understanding with PROM. And then there are additional ones outside the United States that we have not tapped into. And this is the folks who are really the golden name in Hollywood and in the industry, working with additionally myself and some technologists, the CTOs. And then the gentleman on the right bottom, Gerard, is the one who produced the Academy Award, Oscar-winning films, from The Penguin March to another film that's probably if you recall, Kyla is the other Academy Award-winning French, it's a French film. And at the end, how do you go forward to prove your case? So this is where the community, the founders, putting money where their mouth is. They have written a script and already been script proof, and with the kind of the team efforts, and already done is multiple reiteration. And Lucas is going to present or produce this movie on blockchain, on prompt, and distribute it in blockchain. And so this is where a complete picture of actually putting money where your mouth is to prove the model, not a typical Web3 projects going out there, raise the money, raise the community, and then go find a project and try to prove the case. This is a proof case that's already happening within the industry. So with that, I'll pause and I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Joe Pan, for this really exciting project. It's great that it's so timely, especially after the writer's strike and the Studio Actors Guild. It's really important. I guess I got a question, if I may just take the moderator's prerogative, and that is, how are you going to minimize the environmental impact of this particular project? Are you using proof of stake rather than proof of work?
Excellent question. So it would all depends on which number, starting with which chain you choose. So Hedera happened to be the most or one of the greenest chain in their, they use what they call the hash graph, and it's like also it's almost like gossip, a spread, and how they use. And so you're right. It's definitely number one. The chain itself would dictate how green or how less energy consuming it would be. At the end, is definitely is you have to compare apple to apple when you say is how much greener or how much is less consuming, less energy to consume, or less or much more efficient. So it's all about comparison. And I would also say you want to compare it with the existing model. Number one, the fact that moving it into blockchain, eventually there are a lot more lawyering will be cut off, and you have a lot less human involvement and a lot more in automation that's happening. But talking about lawyering, if I may preempt any question, it's going to be an uphill battle in fighting the establishments of the studio. They will be using everything they can on, from regulation, lobbying to the legislative framework, to actually using lawsuits and other things to stop and to go against this. So this is also for us, for people who work on this project on prompt, will be a bottom-up approach. Hopefully we will have an advent of adaptation and adoptions through the ground up first. And this is where independent producer who are willing to come on board and actually saying we will be using smart contracts going forward. And this is also good timing. Had this been a couple years before people tried to talk about this, you will never have studios or producer even give you the time of the day. But now after the strike, everyone recognized the entire Hollywood creative systems or loyalty system is broken. And this is also the strike forced everyone onto the on the negotiation table, and which is still continuing. And this is also a good timing that people really see the technology and a new model forward is the only way to solve the Hollywood crisis.
Well, thank you for that. And speaking of timing, we're running up against our what we promised we would use of our speakers' time. So thank you, Joe Pan, for that intervention and for helping us with a real practical problem and a use case that that should be very exciting as it goes forward. Now, going forward, we have Professor Dr. Michael Sung, who's joining us from Shanghai. He is an old friend, and I'm just excited that he's here. He's a technology venture builder and investor. He's founded several successful companies in a number of diverse high-tech industries, ranging from semiconductor equipment to graphene manufacturing. He's chairman of Carbon Blue Innovations, a technology tech platform and investment fund. He's doing a ton of work all around the world, most recently in the United Arab Emirates. A highly sought after speaker, so we're very lucky to have him here. He's served in so many advisory roles for the Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Chinese governments on the international tech transfer. He is involved in the Emirates Metaverse Declaration, one of the founders of that. A co-founder of the One World Blockchain Alliance, an industry consortium connecting the world's leading blockchain ecosystem companies to China's Belt and Road initiatives. And he is just a powerhouse in so many ways, with an electrical engineering PhD from MIT. Without further ado, and in the interest of time, because I could go on and on, we've got Michael Sung in the house with us. Thanks for coming.
Hey, Jamie, thank you very much for the warm introduction. Can everybody see my screen? Yes. Okay. All right. Cool. So I if you notice, there's about 120 slides, and I have a 30-minute allotted thing. So I'm just going to give a super whirlwind tour. Sam has talked a lot about the basics of what a blockchain is, and so I'll kind of forgo some of the stuff. But I kind of want to set a context as to why it's all important. Instead of talking about sort of the technical details of what decentralization is, what does that mean for, say, the finance world or the world at large, right? And so I kind of want to talk about digital disruption as a concept, and where it's going to bring us, right? So the first digital revolution happened, 25, 30 years ago was the internet, right? And we took a bunch of information and we digitized that, right? Well, at the time, remember there was computers, right? But maybe it was, a hard drive, isolated data, or maybe it was like, information in library books. That's literally how you got access to information. And what the digitization did was make it free for everyone. Right, it made the marginal cost of delivery of that information zero. It kind of blurred all the borders of where that information could be got at, whether it's on computers or other things. And it spawned a lot of new business models, namely things like Google and where services are provided for free in exchange for data, which becomes the new commodity of value, right? And so what's happening now because of blockchain and what I generally term as digital finance is a new digital revolution. Now it's not the digitization of information, it's a digitization of value itself. And this is very general. So just like the internet 20 years ago, this is a general purpose technology that will cross industries. It doesn't matter if you bake bread or a dancer or work as a banker. Everybody can use the internet, right, to benefit their lives. And likewise, this new digital finance wave is a new area of disruption, right? So what we're in the midst of happening in 2023 is the wholesale digitization of the world's assets, right? Every asset, right? We talked a little bit about CBDCs, digital money, but in addition to that, we can think of anything of value can now be packaged in a fungible form as a digital asset and blur the boundaries across platforms and geographies the same way that information had. So including, hundreds of trillions of dollars of real estate, $100 trillion of debt or stocks, fine arts, commodities, et cetera. The whole world's going to digitize. And these are roughly a couple orders of magnitude larger than the entire crypto industry of $1 trillion or so, right? So if you're talking about stocks, it's $100 trillion of stocks and bonds across the world, et cetera, et cetera. So what this does is it allows massive liquidity. Okay, this is a technical term in finance to basically essentially find money or buyers for whatever asset you have, right? And traditionally you have to go to the stock market and do these kind of things. But now what is happening is by the wholesale digitization of what we call real world assets. I think it's a new modern term, RWA, real world assets. We can now apply the financialization tools that you apply to the stock market, right? Like portfolio analysis, derivatives, right? ETFs, all that financial machinery that was just in the domain of stocks and bonds can now be applied to any and all asset classes. And it can be done so democratized access to anybody who has, like a little sub-Saharan farmer or a Brazilian grandma, people who normally don't associate with financial infrastructure like that can now use, these tools to be prosperous. The same way that, say, the democratization of YouTube or TikTok now is giving broadcasting rights to the whole world, right? Now we can now democratize financial services, right? And there's a perfect storm that's happening now, right? There was COVID, which increased fintech adoption 10 years in one semester, this kind of thing. And also, if you look at the digital economy, it's roughly 40% of modern GDPs, like US or China. Okay, so 40% from zero, 20, 25, 30 years ago has now become digital. And that's a unilateral trend. It's going to go more and more because digitization, as you know, is very convenient for everyone, right? Technology is maturing. This is an analogy from the first internet back in the early days where you had to connect to the internet using a 56K modem. The security, the reliability, the transmission speeds weren't there. But once we have Moore's law, right? Technology doubling in performance or reducing in cost every 18 months. And after a few doublings, things get really, mature and industry grade. And that's what blockchains are happening right now. The first blockchain that was referenced before in Bitcoin did 10 transactions per second. right? And now we're in fifth, sixth generation blockchains where we're doing 60,000, 100,000 transactions per second. That's enough to support, for example, as reference, Visa network is roughly about 50,000 transactions per second concurrently across the world. So to be able to support a retail global payment use case, the technology already is mature, and regulation is coming in around the world, whether it's the UAE, notably Switzerland, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, Singapore, the US, all the regulations in place. And so that means that we are now moving very quickly to onboard real assets. The World Economic Forum says $24 trillion worth of this stuff in less than half a decade. And you know, things like CBDC, central bank digital currencies, the Bank of International Settlements say that you know, 1/5 of global population will be doing using CBDCs within a few years, right? The underlying technology, as Sam was very kind to elucidate, is this new blockchain technology. Think of it as new internet 2.0, but with trust factors, decentralized and transparent and all this kind of stuff. And basically results in decentralized or distributed ledgers. Now, this has been deployed in many places now. Just examples. These are 5 different trade finance blockchain consortia. You look at the bank names here; they're all big boys, right? All trying to put trade finance on various types of blockchains. Australian Stock Exchange is putting their entire you know, financial infrastructure for the nation on blockchain, right? And really, it was started by this the Bitcoin blockchain we won't get into, which has now achieved a certain status as a digital gold, right? A commodity that is a store of value. We could argue about whether or not it's a good payment mechanism, but it is an alternative asset class onto its own, right? Then about a handful of years later, the second blockchain of note came about, which is Ethereum. Which is think of it as a blockchain attached to a world decentralized computer. So now you have smart contracts that can actually program things. And the killer app for that was the issuance of cryptocurrencies, right? So in 2017, you might have heard this ICO craze, initial coin offering. And basically now there's tens of thousands of tokens or coins being issued where you can use the blockchain to programmatically limit the scarcity of the coin, thereby proving the fact that it's a limited you know, quantity, which is a very key aspect of the supply chain dynamics of these things, right? You know, and this has caused hundreds of millions of dollars to get invested. This is just in that 2018 era. We had projects raise hundreds, if not billions of dollars. The largest ICO was $4.3 billion in the space of weeks. Okay, this is US dollars. These are huge numbers, right? And now you might have heard in circa a couple iterations later, you know, the collapse of Terra Luna and Three Arrows and FTX and stuff like that. Basically, what has turned out is most of these guys don't like regulation for a reason, because they want to do things in an unregulated way, and there's a lot of money laundering and commingling of funds and all sorts of bad stuff. And now we're seeing the whole entire crypto market collapse, and this is where regulation really comes in, right? So around the world, you have regulators, you know, kind of stepping in to kind of clean up the mess of unregulated crypto, KYC, AML, anti-money laundering regulation, the asset laws for, you know, how to deal with these things, and even tax treatment has now been really refined, right? Just a little plug. So I work at the Zhejiang International Business School. I founded the Institute of Digital Finance Innovation, and we're looking at a lot of the, I would say, institutional use cases for digital finance. And I make a very strong distinction between regulated digital assets and unregulated crypto, right? So, you know, crypto is a $1 trillion little, you know, kiddie pool pond where, you know, the crypto guys hang out, and we can argue whether that innovation is going to be sustained or not, right? But there's going to be a big boy version of that where the JP Morgans and the Goldman Sachs and the, you know, Citibanks of the world are going to use the same technology in a refined way, right? And so Jamie referred to, for example, at the research center, I'm putting up a legal consortia We call the St. Moritz Declaration because it was founded in St. Moritz at a very important crypto conference where we're looking at legal frameworks for digital assets, right, around the world and making them, slipstream into financial ecosystems, right? And this is a very important task, right? I'm also the chief scientist for this Frontier Institute of Regulatory Supervision Technology. So giving policy recommendations to the People's Bank of China and the CSRC on these type of things, right? Because now we're talking, like as I mentioned, big boys, right? With regulation, with tax treatment, with the legal regulatory sophistication, we can now have institutional adoption. So JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon is very famous for, saying Bitcoin was a scam circa 2015. 2 years later, his company, JP Morgan, issues their own JP Morgan coin. They're creating a swift replacement for digital currencies called Partior. They're on the game. Bitcoin has now become a mainstream asset class. NASDAQ has been trading Bitcoin futures for almost a decade. Goldman Sachs bought, exchanges. Circle is a notable issuer of a stable coin. Pension funds and endowments now will have Bitcoin exposure. Coinbase listed as a NASDAQ listed company at one point worth $100 billion, now a little bit less. Grayscale's thinking about doing Bitcoin ETFs. And when you get to what we call exchange traded funds, this is where, big money, right? This is where, most of the institutional money for stocks and bonds happen when you get into ETFs. And so we're on the verge of that's happening around the world. PayPal's making it easy for retail to get access to Bitcoin, hundreds of millions of people. We even got presidents. This is the president of El Salvador putting a lot of their central bank reserves into Bitcoin. We'll see if that bet pays off for him. A lot of people are moving in. Facebook tried to create their own digital currency called Libra in 2019, and that set off a regulatory backlash around the world, right? Notably, PBOC, who have been secretly, developing their own digital currency, we call central bank digital currency, CBDC, called the digital RMB or ECNY since 2014. And they're going crazy with it. So China, actually, a big theme of my talk is the fact that China is leading the world in all of it. Okay, really, the underlying infrastructure of the blockchain to the first, I would say, credible instantiation of a central bank digital currency that we're going to push for the whole country, and then up and down Belt and Road to all the digital finance stuff on the top. Right, and they're doing it internationally across the Bay as well, right? And there's the very interesting use cases for this. You can actually program the money. Now it's digitized. You can put a little smart contract or AI automation or big data techniques to do all sorts of very interesting use cases with that. And so one potential is to be able to enhance fiscal and monetary policy. Right, across the world, you can actually now zap money to anyone. You can allow money flow going across borders. In a sort of super fine grained way. I like investment of this type going into the country. I don't like capital flows of this type leaving the country. All sorts of very interesting possibilities with the technology. Right, so a first mover is central bank digital currencies, with 9 out of 10 central banks now getting in on the game. There's going to be a digital euro within 3 years. There already is a digital Hong Kong dollar, a digital RMB, digital this and that, whatever. And then even stablecoin, which is private sector version of the money, has now cracked $150 billion with trillions of dollars of transactional volume, mainly on the back of what we call decentralized finance, right? Which kind of happened in 2020. So about 2 years ago, the ability to have not a decentralized exchange using smart contracts and stuff like that, so that you don't even need a middleman, if you were, to exchange digital currencies. This really pushed a lot of new innovation. Now, a key to all of this is interoperability, right? Because if you're building on one blockchain, Ethereum here, another guy using Solana, another guy's using Hedera on this side, right now, these guys don't talk to each other. And so it's really when the power of these fragmented chains start to be able to interoperate and toss assets at each other in reliable ways, which is where the power of the decentralization occurs. And this is what's happening as we speak. So different central banks are now exploring interoperability with their central bank digital currencies. Think of this as explicitly a SWIFT replacement. Okay, bank-to-bank wholesale settlements of huge amounts of trillions of dollars of payments across the world can now be settled bilaterally without the intervention of the US dollar, without the use of SWIFT. This is a game changer for the international monetary system, right? Switzerland is doing the same. Actually, Asia is leading the world in all of this development, much more so than the West. Okay, certainly more than the US because regulatory gray area is happening there. Switzerland is an early mover, but I would argue has not done very much since its initial attempts. So most of the activity is happening out in Asia. It's happening out in Singapore, it's happening out in Hong Kong, and now it's happening out in the UAE. So if you guys are interested in this stuff, you should look at to the east for where really the development and the implementation at scale is happening, right? Cross-border payments is a great use case, $24 trillion. JP Morgan and Oliver Wyman gave a study saying that digital currencies can reduce the cost of payment transfer by 80% and save hundreds of billions of dollars a year. JP Morgan's, in fact, privatized a company with DBS Bank and Temasek, the sovereign wealth fund of Singapore, to basically create digital currencies that can do payments, transactions. I myself am working on a company called Free Flow, which is allowing retail bank-to-bank transfers. Think of it as a Visa SWIFT network that will allow digital currencies to transmit between wallet to wallet, payment rail, whatever. Okay, again, without the intermediation of banks, which takes 3 days to transfer anything, costs big huge transaction fees going across correspondent banks, whatever. Now think of it as instantaneous retail transactions that go from Alipay to PayPal, let's say, right? Self-custody with your money in your wallet. You hold the keys, you own the money. This is game changing. So just the word is that China is leading this digital asset revolution. In 2019, Xi Jinping made it national strategy for blockchain technologies. I worked on projects like the blockchain-based service network, which is tying in huge players and vertically integrating cloud computing stuff. Xi Jinping is interested in what he calls modernizing governance, okay, which is the idea of being able to take heterogeneous data from different networks, right, and to be able to kind of collate that, do the big data thing, use AI to automate, whatever. So it's basically, you can think of it as blockchain is the backbone of China's new smart city strategy, okay, to allow everything to connect together. And they're trying stuff in a place called Hainan, which is the southernmost island in China. This is now being framed as new Hong Kong. Okay, already I think you when you cross the border, you have to use a passport. Okay, so special economic zone where the liberalization of the technology of blockchain, as well as eventually the digital currency, will happen. So now there's this internationalization attempt of using the ECNY, the digital RMB, to help with the RMB internationalization. So I talk about this a lot. This process is probably going to take a lot of time because the Chinese government doesn't want to freely let the convertibility of RMB happen because they've seen what's happened to other countries when they liberalize too fast. So they want to control that over decades. And then now in the frame of a trade or tech or now currency war, we see that the U.S. is now playing heavy-handed in things like sanctions. I looked it up. The U.S. has sanctioned countries, 22 countries representing 1/5 of global GDP. They're running out of countries to sanction. And when you do that, and the whole world watches you, unilaterally confiscate, hundreds of billions of dollars of central bank reserves. And not just Russia, in Afghanistan, doing the same, and then giving it to 9/11 victims inexplicably, unrelated to, Afghanistan altogether. This type of activity causes the world to get very concerned that the monetary system is being politicized. So what you're seeing now is a very, very disruptive thing happening. The dollar has lost most of its value in the last number of years. 80% of dollar issuances, $13 trillion worth, happened since 2020. Think about that for a second. Anybody holding a US dollar has essentially devalued their currency, or had the Fed devalue their currency over the last 2 years, right? And so this is, for people who hold US dollar, they don't like that. So you're seeing a lot of countries getting, openly calling for de-dollarization, right? This is BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, adding half a dozen new countries, including UAE, Saudi Arabia. They're all de-dollarizing, and also ASEAN, the ASEAN bloc wanting to de-dollarize, right? So you can, and BRICS is now, with the new members, 1/3 of the world in terms of population, and basically half of all natural resources across oil, natural gas, and coal, right? China is now accepting, or trading oil in RMB. Iran is trying to do the same. Venezuela is trying to do the same. Russia has been doing it for a long time. And now we're in a zone where the next evolution of all this is now financial, right? So it looks like China's not down with crypto, which is true. They don't like the unregulated stuff, but the regulated stuff they like. So, for example, I'm working with the Chinese Securities Reform Commission. They're putting all of stocks and bonds for the country of China on a blockchain as we speak, right? I have actually a partnership with that blockchain. So, so here you have it. You have countries now going to digitize all of their stocks and bonds, and coming at a time where China's financial markets are opening up, right? And just Jamie wanted me to talk a little bit about green stuff. So, just a note: by 2060, this is Xi Jinping saying that China's going to be carbon neutral. This is going to require $10+ trillion of investment, or 2% of cumulative GDP, according to BCG. And China does not have that money themselves, because what that means is that they're going to open up the capital markets for foreign direct investment into the country to support the future development of the country as well as its green initiatives, right? So I believe that things like digitization of green bonds is going to be a first mover for the world in these kind of things, right? Because you have 130 banks holding $50 trillion that want to go into sustainability, but sustainability requires a lot of tracking and tracing of the use of funds, and ESG reporting, and like compliance, this and that. So it's not very easy to do. There's this issue of greenwashing where people pretend to be green and actually it's not very green, so basically blockchain becomes a perfect type of technology to allow multi-party coordination to be able to do all this kind of stuff, right? And so already, in Singapore, a $300 million bond has been issued, and China is the second largest bond market in the whole world. And there's a lot of FDI that wants to come into China because basically yield rates around the world are zero or very, they were very, very low. And China has better yield rates. So this is a huge opportunity for cross-border securitization happen. So essentially what's happening is China is now in the mode to internationalize its technology. Okay, it used to be Belt and Road. It's 130 countries representing most of the high growth GDP areas of the world. In Africa, for example, 40 million unsubscribed phone subscribers. China owns 50% of the mobile headsets on the continent and have developed 70% of the mobile networks. So it used to be that China was doing a lot of infrastructure development, right? Railways and telecom and whatever. The new digital Silk Road is going to be digitized. Okay, it's about payments and logistics and trade finance and things like this. And this is all focused on blockchain. So that's going to basically give a lot of financial inclusion opportunities for the rest of the world, right? In 2015, and developing areas of the world, you got 1.6 billion people that can now be banked, 95 million additional jobs, and over $4 trillion of GDP can be added, right? And just the final note is that if you look at crypto market now, Bitcoin and the whole crypto market is less than $1 trillion worth of market cap scale. Compare that to any asset class that matters, right? The global body of money supply is 2 orders of magnitude. So when the world digitized and when institutional digitized, this is going to be a much higher effect on the global financial services than just the unregulated crypto side, right? And I would argue at the very end, okay, that this is inevitable, right? 20 years ago, we got Hotmail, right? And then Gmail. We got email for free, right? And that compared to how we transmitted information through the postal service, years before, is radically transformative. Now, I would argue, again, it's a unilateral trend, right? Nobody's going to go back to, mailing paper letters at each other once you have access to free email. It's just too affordable and convenient and instantaneous. And by the way, now it's digitized. You can use AI and all sorts of stuff to add value on top of the information stack that you have. That's what's happening, right? And now the equivalent, Swift is a 70-year-old technology. It's not going to really hold water in this new day and age. So what you're going to see is the consolidation of financial services on your mobile phone. Okay, it's going to start with payments, but in the very near future, you're going to be able to, get insurance, get loans for your SME or trade finance, invest into products. This is huge for the financially excluded, right? Imagine a guy that doesn't have a bank and in Africa now can take his assets and invest into Chinese green bonds or whatever else is being floated around the internet at and maybe make a living beyond inflation. Okay, this is game changing for the rest of the world. Okay, I will end up that. There's a new digital revolution coming. If anybody's interested in this topic, come and find me. I talk about this a lot and very passionate to work with people who are interested in taking advantage of it.
Wow. Michael-san, like drinking from a fire hydrant, a digital fire hydrant. That was amazing. Thank you so much. We have time for 1 or 2 questions, depending on how long they were. That was really helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael-san. I've got 1 or 2 questions if anybody else doesn't, but wanted to check. Karen, please go right ahead. Professor Dr. Clem Franco.
Yes, well, thank you very much. This was very interesting, and was thinking about security of this decentralized blockchain. And we were discussing this last week in class. We had the first judicial decision in Brazil pledging some assets, digital assets on Bitcoins and a digital wallet. And then we had some reports of students having their digital wallet stolen and so on. And you were talking about the regulation that governments may bring. How do you see, is there a possibility of putting some regulation without blowing everything up, taking a little bit of the advantages of one side, but also giving a little bit security for people for these transactions? How do you see this? Thank you.
Yeah, so actually this is a very good question, and it's actually a specific focus of mine, talking about the policy related to this, right? If you look at most of the policy for regulation of digital assets, it's actually kind of retrospective. It's like, hey, we have all these laws for, normal real estate and normal payments and normal this and that. And now we got this digital version coming in, and now we got to go and figure out what this is. Is this, is Bitcoin a commodity? Is it security? Is it a, utility? So everybody's trying to, and by the way, every one of those, if you decide any which way, it's a different regulatory body that regulates that, right? If it's a commodity, it's the CFTC. If it's a security, it's SEC. If it's payments, it's some other. So basically, it's a mess, right? And so what we're trying to do is actually change the way that the dialogue is happening. Instead of trying to get all these regulatory bodies all over the world to kind of figure out all this new technology stuff, we want to just slipstream into existing regulatory frameworks. Okay, the definition of a security is very clear, right? There's this how we test, there's all these rules. So why don't we redefine digital asset as a bundle of rights, right? Which is a well-known concept in legal discourse, right? I mean, like the concept of ownership, even, right, is a very legally interesting concept, and so we don't care what the ownership is. We will define the ownership of a certain bundle of rights that have slipstream into existing regulatory frameworks, and then we can have the best of both worlds. We have a regulatory, framework that has withstand the test of time, and then we can kind of slipstream new technology and new definitions into the regulatory frameworks. That way, we can get interoperability at a sort of legal regulatory level. The other aspect, I think, is I think adding privacy to the discussion, right? Because there's a lot of talk on like CBDCs, being surveillance state, big brother, monitoring your transactions and stuff like that. Actually, I think probably overblown the implication. Not to say that they're not privacy concerns, but one is that I think most of these central banks have cooked in privacy at an acceptable level. And frankly, to be honest, not much different than what already exists, right? All your money is already digitized in a bank, which is being, like KYC'd and stuff. So you already have a certain level of surveillance, if you will, at that level. But we can do better. We can use new technologies, like what we call zero knowledge proofs, right? New cryptographic techniques where we can ensure that a transaction has both parties in whitelisted. You're not on a blacklist because you're not a money launderer, blah, blah, blah. But I don't need to know your social security number and where you live and a photo ID of you, right? The technology allows the transaction to happen only if certain checks occur, which satisfy the government, but yet are privacy preserving. It doesn't need to know that you're buying condoms at 7-Eleven or whatever it is, just none of their business. So I think there's this huge area of what we call RegTech, regulation technology, where we can apply the best of both worlds. We can allow the countries or regulatory bodies to have essentially fine-grained control over whatever they care about while being privacy preserving. And so I think this is a very interesting area to go in. I tend to be a more optimistic person. Technology has its good use cases and bad use cases. It's just a tool. But I do believe in the positive ability for society to harness these tools in meaningful ways in the benefit of humanity and society.
That's terrific, and comes right to the point where we promised we would go with our sponsors and partners. And thank you, Dr. Michael Sung. That was awesome, from the Institute of Digital Finance Innovation. And thank you to Delton Chen, who unfortunately had to jump off. Dr. Chen, thank you. And Joe Penn in Hong Kong from NFT Impact Alliance. And finally, Sam Borghese from UCLA Department of Economics. What a wonderful panel. Thank you, Jose Pontes, Dr. Karen Clem Franco for the invitation to participate, to all our friends at Facamp. And Zed, you want to have the last words? Sorry, I should have given you a warning there.
Hey, thank you very much for all these brilliant panels, especially the last one, who is still with us, Michael Sung. Very interesting and with a lot of questions, and we expect to talk later in another session more dedicated to this panel and to the trends that are to come, especially with the hints that you gave to us this night here in Brazil. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor James Cooper, for presiding this panel. We would like to thank you everyone for participating in the questions we have here. And we are again starting tomorrow to the next panel. Thank you. Have a good night and have a good day there in Asia, in China, Professor Mike Sun in Hong Kong. And good afternoon there, James Cooper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, and wonderful presentations all around. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.